A day after we moved into the new apartment, the previous owner called me and said I forgot to turn off a hidden camera server. I saw what your son did while you were at the hardware store. Come over right now alone. When I saw the footage, it left me terrified. Before I continue this story, please like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by the echo of emptiness that only money can buy. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a view that cost me $3.5 million in cash. I am Luther Banks. I am 66 years old. For 40 years, I worked as a structural engineer. I built bridges. I designed skyscrapers. I know exactly how much weight a steel beam can hold before it snaps. I know that even the most beautiful building will collapse if the foundation is rotten. But standing there that afternoon, I had no idea that the foundation of my own life was already crumbling beneath my feet. My wife Odessa was in the master bedroom unpacking her collection of porcelain dolls. She was humming a gospel tune, her voice raspier than usual. She had a cough that had been lingering for weeks, a dry hacking sound that doctors dismissed as allergies, but that made my engineer's intuition twitch. We had moved here to relax, to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I had never told my son Tyrell exactly how much money I had accumulated. To him, I was just a retired worker with a decent pension and a lucky streak in real estate. I believed in being humble. I believed that flashiness attracted predators. I never suspected the predators were already inside the house. My phone vibrated in my pocket, cutting through the silence. It was an unknown number. I usually ignore them, but something told me to answer. Mr. Banks. The voice was clipped metallic and cold. It was Mr. Abernathy, the former owner of the penthouse. He was a tech mogul, a man who had made a fortune in cybersecurity before vanishing into a life of eccentric privacy. Mr. Abernathy, is there a problem with the closing documents? I asked. No documents, Luther. Listen to me very carefully. When I sold you the place, I wiped the main security systems just like we agreed, but I have a redundant server in my basement, a backup for the backup. I forgot to kill the feed to the master bedroom. I felt a flash of irritation. You are watching us. I was deleting the feed, Luther, until I saw who was in your room 2 hours ago. You went to the hardware store, right? Yes, I went to get wall anchors. Well, while you were gone, your son Tyrell and that wife of his, Paige, were in there. They were not helping your wife unpack. You need to see this. Come to my estate immediately. Do not tell them. Do not bring your wife. Just come. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, my hand trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from a sudden drop in cabin pressure in my soul. I walked to the bedroom door. Odessa was sitting on the edge of the bed, catching her breath. Odessa, baby, I have to run out again. I ordered the wrong size brackets for the television mount. She smiled at me. That smile had been my anchor for 35 years. Go on, Luther. Tyrell and Paige said they might stop by later to bring dinner anyway. Her mention of them made my stomach turn. Tyrell was 32 years old and still waiting for the world to hand him a living. He blamed the economy. He blamed the system. He blamed everyone but the man in the mirror. And Paige, his wife. She was a pharmacist with a smile that was too wide and eyes that were too cold. A white woman from the suburbs who always looked at us like she was studying a species she didn't quite understand. I drove to Abernathy's estate in a trance. I analyzed the concrete of the highway overpasses as I drove under them, calculating stress loads just to keep my mind from spiraling. When I arrived, Abernathy met me at the gate. He didn't offer me a drink. He didn't ask how the move was. He led me straight to a room that looked like the cockpit of a spaceship. Screens covered every wall. He pulled up a video file. The timestamp was 2:15 p.m. today. On the screen, I saw my new bedroom. It was gray and unfinished. Then the door opened. Tyrell walked in. He wasn't carrying boxes. He was carrying a handheld device, a high-end stud finder, or maybe a ground-penetrating radar scanner. Paige followed him. She closed the door and locked it. I watched in silence as my son walked to the north wall, the one behind where the headboard would go. He ran the scanner over the plaster, moving slow and methodical. Here is the audio, Abernathy said, pressing a button. The sound was crisp. Paige's voice cut through the room, sharp and commanding. You are moving too fast, Ty. The old man is a structural engineer. He doesn't use drywall safes. He builds them into the load-bearing columns. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. They weren't looking for loose cash. They were hunting. "This concrete is too thick," Tyrell muttered on the screen. "It is blocking the signal." "Are you sure he brought it here? Maybe he left it in the safe deposit box?" "He doesn't trust banks," Paige snapped. She walked into the frame. Her face was twisted in a sneer I had never seen before. "Not at Sunday dinners, not at Christmas. He is paranoid. He keeps the bearer bonds and the gold physically close. We have to find it, Tyrell. We have to find it before the old woman dies." The air left my lungs. Before the old woman dies. They were talking about Odessa. Tyrell lowered the scanner. "She is just coughing, Paige. It is not pneumonia." "It is a matter of time," Paige hissed. Her voice was like acid. "Once she is gone, he might donate everything to some charity in her memory, or he might remarry. We cannot risk it. We need that capital now. The loan sharks are not going to wait for his natural causes, Tyrell." "Loan sharks. My son was involved with loan sharks." I watched as Tyrell slammed his hand against the wall. "I hate this. I hate begging him for scraps while he sits on millions. He looks at me like I am a failure." "You are a failure," Paige said. "But you won't be once we liquidate his assets. Now stop whining and scan the floor vents." The video ended. The screen went black. But the image of my son scanning my walls like a thief was burned into my retinas. Abernathy swiveled his chair around. "I didn't know if I should show you, but I figured a man like you would want to know the structural integrity of his own house." I stared at the blank screen. I didn't cry. Engineers don't cry when a bridge fails. We assess the damage. We calculate the point of failure. And we rebuild or we condemn. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy," I said. My voice sounded hollow even to me. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small black case. "I am a paranoid man, Luther. That is why I am still rich. In this box are 4 listening devices. Military grade, size of a screwhead, battery life of 3 years. If they are hunting for your treasure, you need to know exactly how far they are willing to go." I took the box. It felt heavier than it looked. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Abernathy shrugged. "Because I hate thieves. And because I looked into your daughter-in-law. Her name is Paige Miller now. But 6 years ago in Ohio, her name was Rebecca Stone. And 4 years before that in Arizona, she was Sarah Jenkins." I frowned. "What are you saying?" "I am saying she is a widow, Luther. Twice. Both husbands died of sudden heart failure. No autopsies requested." The room seemed to tilt. My knees felt weak. Sudden heart failure. And now she was in my house feeding my wife. "I have to go," I said. "Be careful," Luther Abernathy warned. "If she is who I think she is, you are not dealing with a greedy relative. You are dealing with a predator who has done this before. Do not confront them. Not yet. If you confront them now, they will scatter like roaches and you will never prove anything. You need to catch them." I walked back to my car. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned the color of ash. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I sat up with when he had the flu. He was in debt to loan sharks. And he was hunting my wealth with a woman who might be a serial killer. And Odessa. My sweet Odessa. They were counting down the days until she died. I started the engine. A cold rage settled over me, replacing the shock. It was a familiar feeling. It was the feeling I got when I looked at a complex blueprint and saw the flaws that everyone else missed. They thought I was just an old man, a retired engineer past his prime. They thought I was structurally unsound. They were about to find out that I was made of reinforced steel. I drove home. I didn't speed. I didn't run red lights. I drove with the precision of a man on a mission. I rehearsed my face in the rearview mirror. I practiced my smile. I practiced the look of a tired, happy old man who just wanted to settle into his new home. When I unlocked the door to the penthouse, the smell hit me first. It was strong and floral. I walked into the kitchen. Paige was standing by the island. She was wearing an apron over her designer clothes. She was stirring a pot of tea. The steam rose up, carrying that thick, floral scent. "Hey, Dad," she chirped. She turned and flashed that wide, empty smile. Tyrell and I decided to come over early and help. I made a special herbal blend for Mom. It is supposed to be great for that cough. I looked at the teapot. I looked at her hands. They They were steady. Tyrell came out of the hallway. He looked sweaty. He wiped his hands on his jeans. "Hey, Pop, find those brackets." "Yeah," I said. I found exactly what I was looking for. I walked past him. I didn't hug him. I couldn't touch him. Not yet. "Where is your mother?" I asked. "She is in the living room resting," Paige said, pouring the tea into a delicate china cup. "I am just taking this to her. It has to be drunk hot to work properly." I watched the steam curl off the liquid. It smelled like hibiscus and mint, but underneath that there was something else, a faint metallic tang, or maybe something bitter, like crushed almonds. My chemistry classes from engineering school came flooding back. Bitter almonds, cyanide, or maybe arsenic, or maybe just a heavy dose of blood thinners. "I let you wait this long," Paige said, walking past me toward the living room where my wife sat unsuspecting. Panic flared in my chest. If Odessa drank, that she might never wake up, or she might wake up and fall and never stop bleeding. I couldn't scream. If I screamed, they would know I knew. Abernathy said to wait, but I couldn't wait. I moved. I moved with a clumsiness I had never possessed. As Paige passed me, I stepped to the left, pretending to trip over a stray packing strip on the floor. "Whoa!" I yelled, flailing my arms. I slammed into Paige. My shoulder hit hers hard. The cup flew from her hand. It shattered against the marble floor. The dark red liquid splashed everywhere, staining the white cabinets, the floor, and Paige's expensive shoes. "Oh my God!" Paige shrieked. The mask slipped for a second. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, venomous rage. "You clumsy old fool." The room went silent. Tyrell froze. Odessa looked up from her chair, startled. Paige stood there, breathing hard. Her eyes were wide. She realized she had slipped. I stayed on the floor, clutching my knee, groaning. "I am sorry. I am sorry. My legs, they just aren't what they used to be." Paige blinked. The rage vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced instantly by that sugary concern. "Oh, Dad, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to yell. I was just startled." "Are you okay?" Tyrell rushed over. He didn't check my knee. He didn't help me up. He grabbed a roll of paper towels and dropped to his knees. He started wiping up the tea frantically. "Leave it, son," I said, trying to sit up. "It is just tea." "No," Tyrell muttered, scrubbing the floor with an intensity that was unnecessary. "It stains Pop. This stone is porous. We got to get it up." He wasn't cleaning. He was destroying evidence. I watched him. He threw the wet paper towels into the trash compactor immediately and cycled it. Gone. Paige helped me up. Her grip was strong. Too strong. "You really need to be more careful, Dad. Falls are the #1 cause of death for people your age." "Is that a fact?" I said, meeting her eyes. She didn't blink. "It is." We just want you to be safe. In fact, Tyrell and I were talking. Our lease is up in 2 days and our new place isn't ready for another 2 weeks. We were wondering, since you have so much space here, if we could crash with you. Just for a fortnight. I could help take care of Mom, make sure she takes her medicine. I looked at Odessa. She was smiling, happy to have her baby boy home. She didn't see the sharks circling. I looked at Tyrell, who was sweating by the trash compactor. I looked at Paige, the widow from Ohio and Arizona. If I said no, they would kill us from a distance. If I said yes, I was inviting the devil into my sanctuary. But if they were in my house, they were under my microscope. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," I lied. "The guest wing is all yours." Paige smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who just watched the gate close behind the prey. "Thank you, Dad," she said. "We are going to take such good care of you." I walked to the bathroom to wash my hands. I locked the door. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single soggy piece of paper towel that I had managed to palm from the floor while Tyrell was panicking. It was soaked in the tea. I put it in a plastic Ziploc bag I had in my pocket for the screws. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were hard. "You want to play house?" I whispered to my reflection. "Let's play." I pulled out my phone and texted a contact I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, a man who ran a private forensic lab. "Need a chemical analysis. Rush job. Life or death." I sent the text. Then I flushed the toilet, washed my hands, and went back out to smile at the people who were planning my funeral. The war had started, and the first battle would be fought tonight under my own roof. The smell hit me the moment I crossed the threshold of my own home. It was not the smell of new paint or the expensive leather of the furniture we had just unpacked. It was sweet, sickeningly sweet. like a bouquet of flowers left in a closed room for too long. I walked into the kitchen and there she was, Paige, my daughter-in-law. She was standing over the marble island stirring a steaming porcelain pot. She wore a floral apron over her designer clothes, looking for all the world like a dutiful housewife from a magazine advertisement. My wife Odessa was sitting at the breakfast nook. She looked frail, her breathing was shallow, and she offered me a weak smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Hey, Dad," Paige chirped. Her voice was too high, too bright. Tyrell and I decided to come over early to help with the boxes. I made a special herbal blend for Mom. It is supposed to be miraculous for that cough. I looked at the pot. I looked at her hands. They were steady, too steady. Tyrell came out of the hallway. He looked sweaty. He wiped his hands on his jeans and avoided my gaze. "Hey, Pop, find those wall anchors you needed." "Yeah," I said. I found exactly what I was looking for. I walked past him. I did not hug him. I could not bring myself to touch him. Not after what I had seen on the screen in Abernathy's basement. I walked toward the kitchen island. The steam rose from the pot carrying that thick floral scent. But as I got closer, my nose twitched. Underneath the hibiscus and the mint, there was something else, a sharp metallic tang, a bitter undertone that cut through the sweetness. Bitter almonds. My mind flashed back 40 years. I was a young structural engineer on a site inspection for a chemical plant. We had to learn about material toxicity. We had to know what solvents could eat through steel and what fumes could drop a man in 10 seconds. I knew that smell. It was the smell of cyanide, or arsenic, or perhaps a concentrated dose of rat poison. It was the smell of death masked by sugar. "I let you wait this long," Paige said, walking past me toward the living room where my wife sat unsuspecting. She poured the dark red liquid into a delicate china cup. Panic flared in my chest. If Odessa drank that, she might never wake up. Or she might wake up and fall and never stop bleeding. I could not scream. If I screamed, they would know I knew. Abernathy had told me to wait, to gather evidence. But I could not wait while my wife held a cup of poison to her lips. I moved. I moved with a clumsiness I had never possessed in my life. I was a man who walked steel beams at 60 stories high. I had balance. But right now I needed to be the old man they thought I was. As Paige passed me, I stepped to the left, pretending to trip over a stray packing strip on the floor. "Whoa!" I yelled, flailing my arms like a man losing his footing. I slammed into Paige. My shoulder hit hers hard. It was a calculated collision. The cup flew from her hand. It shattered against the marble floor. The dark red liquid splashed everywhere, staining the white cabinets, the floor, and Paige's expensive Italian shoes. The sound of the china breaking was like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. "You stupid old fool," Paige shrieked. The mask slipped. It fell completely away. Her face twisted into a mask of pure venomous rage. Her eyes bulged. Her lips curled back over her teeth. "What is wrong with you?" she yelled, her voice guttural and raw. "Look what you did!" The room went silent. Tyrell froze in the hallway. Odessa looked up from her chair, startled, her hand clutching her chest. Paige stood there, breathing hard. Her hands were clenched into fists. For a second, she looked like she was going to strike me. Then she blinked. She looked at Odessa. She looked at Tyrell. She realized she had shown her true face. I stayed on the floor, clutching my knee, groaning. I squeezed my eyes shut. I am sorry. My legs, they just aren't what they used to be. I felt dizzy. The rage vanished from Paige's face as quickly as it had appeared, replaced instantly by that sugary concern that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Dad. Oh my God. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to yell, I was just startled. Are you okay? Let me help you up." She reached for me, but I flinched. It was a genuine reaction. I did not want her hands on me. Tyrell rushed over. He did not check my knee. He did not ask if I was hurt. He did not help his father up. He grabbed a roll of paper towels and dropped to his knees. He started wiping up the tea frantically. "Leave it, son," I said, trying to sit up. "It is just tea. We can get a mop later." "No," Tyrell muttered, scrubbing the floor with an intensity that was completely unnecessary. "It stains, Pop. This stone is porous. We gotta get it up. We gotta get it all up right now." He wasn't cleaning. He was destroying evidence. He was terrified that if that liquid dried and someone analyzed it, they would find out what was really in the special herbal blend. I watched him. He threw the wet paper towels into the trash compactor immediately and cycled it. The machine whirred, crunching the evidence into a block of garbage. Gone. Or so he thought. Paige helped me up. Her grip was strong. Too strong. You really need to be more careful, Dad, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only I could hear. Falls are the #1 cause of death for people your age. Is that a fact? I said, meeting her eyes. She didn't blink. It is. We just want you to be safe. We want everyone to be safe. I limped to the nearest chair. I needed to get away from them, but I also needed to stay. I looked at the floor. Tyrell had missed a spot, a small puddle near the base of the cabinet. He hadn't seen it in his panic. I need a glass of water, I said. My throat is dry. I will get it, Paige said quickly. Sit down, Dad. Don't strain yourself. She went to the fridge. Tyrell was still scrubbing a clean spot on the floor, sweating profusely. While their backs were turned, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a plastic Ziploc bag I had kept for the screws. I pretended to adjust my shoe. I swiped the bag over the remaining puddle, soaking up the red liquid with a piece of lint from my pocket. I sealed the bag and shoved it back into my pants. I had the sample. Now I just needed to survive the night. Paige handed me the water. Her smile was back in place, but her eyes were cold, dead things. You know, Dad? She said, leaning against the counter. Tyrell and I were talking earlier. This was actually a bit of serendipity. What do you mean? I asked, taking a sip of the water only after watching her fill it from the tap. Well, Tyrell started. He stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. He looked nervous. He looked like a man who owed money to bad people. Our landlord, he is a jerk. He decided to sell the building. He gave us an eviction notice today. 3 days to get out. An eviction notice. I knew for a fact that Tyrell hadn't paid rent in 4 months. Abernathy had told me that too. But I nodded, playing the part of the oblivious father. That is terrible, son, I said. Yeah, Tyrell said. And our new place isn't ready for another 2 weeks. We are kind of in a bind. We have nowhere to go. He looked at Paige. She gave him a subtle nod. A command. We were wondering, Tyrell continued, his voice trembling slightly. Since you have so much space here, this penthouse is huge, Pop. We were wondering if we could crash with you, just for a fortnight, until the new place is ready. I looked at Odessa. She was smiling, happy to have her baby boy home. She didn't see the sharks circling. She didn't see the knife hidden behind the smile. I looked at Tyrell, who was sweating by the trash compactor. I looked at Paige, the widow from Ohio and Arizona. If I said no, they would kill us from a distance. They would find another way. A cut brake line. A gas leak. If I said yes, I was inviting the devil into my sanctuary. But if they were in my house, they were under my microscope. If they were in my house, I could watch them. I could record them. I could catch them. That sounds like a wonderful idea, I lied. The guest wing is all yours. Paige smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who just watched the gate close behind the prey. Thank you, Dad, she said. We are going to take such good care of you. And Mom, especially Mom. I felt a chill run down my spine. I walked to the bathroom to wash my hands. I locked the door. I pulled out my phone and texted a contact I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. A man who ran a private forensic lab. A man who owed me a favor. Need a chemical analysis. Rush job. Life or death. I sent the text. Then I flushed the toilet, washed my hands, and went back out to smile at the people who were planning my funeral. The war had started, and the first battle would be fought tonight under my own roof. I looked at my wife, I looked at my son, and I made a silent vow. I would not let them win. Not while there was still breath in my body. Not while I could still stand. I was Luther Banks. And I was about to bring the whole house down on top of them. The next morning, the war for my sanity began before I had even poured my first cup of coffee. I woke up with the sunrise, a habit from 40 years on construction sites. I reached for my wallet on the nightstand where I had placed it every night since 1982. It was gone. I checked the floor. I checked the bathroom. Nothing. I walked into the kitchen. Tyrell was eating cereal. Paige was cutting fruit. Odessa was sitting by the window looking out at the city view, but her eyes were glassy and distant. Morning, Luther, she said. Did you sleep well? I slept fine, Odessa, I said. But I cannot find my wallet. Paige stopped cutting. She turned around with that furrowed brow of concern that I was beginning to hate. Oh, Dad. Not again. What do you mean, not again? I asked. She sighed loud and long. You left it in the refrigerator. I saw it there when I got the milk. I walked to the fridge and yanked the door open. There it was. My brown leather wallet sitting on the middle shelf next to a carton of eggs. Cold condensation had formed on the leather. I stared at it. I knew I hadn't put it there. I was a man of precision. I was a man of routine. "And your keys," Tyrell mumbled with his mouth full. "You threw them in the trash compactor, Dad. Luckily, I saw them before I ran the cycle." He pointed to the counter. My car keys sat there. I did not put my keys in the trash, I said, my voice low and steady. Paige walked over to Odessa and put a hand on her shoulder. "Mom, look at him. He is getting agitated. This is exactly what the doctor was talking about. Early onset dementia, the confusion, the misplaced objects, the denial." Odessa looked at me. For the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear for me, but fear of me. She looked at me like I was a stranger who might snap at any moment. "Luther, honey, maybe we should see a specialist," she whispered. "You have been forgetting things lately?" I felt the walls closing in. They were gaslighting me. They were painting a picture of a senile old man so that when I finally accused them of theft or murder, no one would believe me. They were rewriting my reality in front of my wife. I looked at Paige. She wasn't smiling. She looked sad, but her eyes were gleaming with a cold victory. I took my wallet from the fridge. It felt like a block of ice in my hand. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just nodded. "Maybe you are right," I said. "I must be tired." I walked away. I let them think they had won the round, but as I turned the corner, I saw Paige wink at Tyrell. A quick, subtle twitch of the eye. It was the signal of a conspirator. They thought they were breaking me. They didn't know that stress testing is the first thing an engineer does before reinforcing the structure. They were testing my limits. Now it was my turn to test theirs. I waited until the house was asleep. The darkness in the penthouse was absolute, broken only by the city lights bleeding in through the curtains. I moved through the halls with the silence of a ghost. I had told Odessa I was going to bed early because I felt confused. It was the perfect cover. I went to the guest bathroom first. I locked the door and turned on the ventilation fan to cover any noise. I pulled out the small black case Abernathy had given me. Inside were 4 cameras. They were masterpieces of espionage. The lenses were no bigger than the head of a Phillips screw. I took my screwdriver set, the one I had told Tyrell was just for hanging pictures. I crept into the hallway. The first outlet was positioned perfectly to cover the living room and the entrance to the master bedroom. I unscrewed the faceplate. My hands were steady. I rewired the internal mount, replacing the bottom screw with the camera lens. It drew power directly from the house current. It would never run out of battery. It would never blink. It would just watch. I moved to the kitchen. This was the critical zone. I repeated the process on the backsplash outlet. It gave me a clear view of the stove, the fridge, and the trash compactor. Finally, I went to the laundry room. I took the Ziploc bag from my pocket, the one containing the paper towel soaked in Paige's special tea. I double-bagged it. I wrote a note on a piece of hotel stationery I had kept. "Check for toxicity. Full spectrum. Do not put my name on the results." I put the sample and the note into a prepaid overnight envelope I had bought days ago. I would drop it in a mailbox miles away from here tomorrow morning during my confused walk. I returned to my bedroom. Odessa was sleeping soundly, too soundly. Her breathing was heavy and rhythmic. I sat in the chair in the corner and opened the app on my phone that connected to the new cameras. The feed was crystal clear. I watched the empty hallway on my screen. I watched the dark kitchen. I was building a trap, building a boa. They wanted to prove I was crazy. I was going to prove they were criminals. I was an engineer. I dealt in facts, physics, and concrete proof. They were dealing in lies. And lies, like poor quality cement, always crack under pressure. I sat there for hours. I didn't sleep. I just watched the black and white feed, waiting for the rats to come out of their holes. At 3:14 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I looked at the screen. The kitchen camera feed flickered to life. Paige walked into the frame. She wasn't wearing pajamas. She was wearing black leggings and a dark shirt. She didn't turn on the lights. She moved by the light of the moon. I watched as she walked to the counter where I had left my wallet before going to bed. I had left it there on purpose, a piece of bait. She picked it up. She opened it and pulled out $200 bills, stuffing them into her bra. Then she walked to the refrigerator. She opened the door and placed the wallet on the bottom shelf behind the milk jug. She stood there for a moment, admiring her handiwork. She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator playing with its food. "Gotcha," I whispered to the screen. She closed the fridge and crept back to her room. I hit save on the video file. I backed it up to the cloud. I backed it up to a secure server Abernathy had set up for me. That video was worth more than gold. It was proof of my sanity. But the real blow came 2 hours later. My phone vibrated again. It was a text message from my contact at the private lab. He must have worked through the night on the digital scan of the sample I had sent him photos of earlier before sending the physical copy. I opened the message. The screen was bright in the dark room. Luther, I hope you didn't drink this. It is not cyanide. It is warfarin, high-grade medical blood thinner. The concentration is massive, 10 times the therapeutic dose. I stared at the words. Warfarin. Why would she give Odessa blood thinners? Odessa didn't have a heart condition. Then the second text came through. If she ingests this daily, her blood will lose the ability to clot almost entirely. A simple bruise could become a massive internal hemorrhage. A fall down the stairs or a slip in the shower would be fatal. It would look like a tragic accident, a brain bleed. I dropped the phone on my lap. I looked at my sleeping wife. Paige wasn't trying to poison her quickly. She was turning Odessa into a walking time bomb. She was thinning her blood so that the slightest trauma would kill her. And suddenly the clumsiness narrative made sense. The constant warnings about falling. The way they moved furniture to create tripping hazards. They were setting the stage. They were going to wait until her blood was thin enough, and then they were going to push her. A cold shiver went through my bones that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They were going to murder my wife right in front of me and make it look like a clumsy old woman falling down. I looked at the camera feed again. The house was quiet. But now I saw it for what it was. It wasn't a home, it was a slaughterhouse, and the butchers were sleeping in the guest room. I deleted the text message. I didn't want Tyrell to see it if he grabbed my phone. I memorized the information, warfarin, blood thinners. I looked at Odessa one last time. I wanted to wake her up. I wanted to run. But if I ran now, they would chase us. They would claim I kidnapped her in a fit of dementia. They would win. No, I had to stay. I had to intercept the tea. I had to switch it out. I had to protect her from the inside until I had enough evidence to put them away for life. I closed my eyes and formulated a new plan. I needed to control the money. If I cut off the money, they would get desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. The next evening, Tyrell organized a dinner that was fit for a coronation. He went all out. He bought prime rib aged steaks from the butcher down the street. He opened a bottle of Cabernet that I knew cost $200 because I was the one who bought it for a special occasion that never came. He set the table with the good silver, the heavy forks and knives that Odessa usually kept locked away for Thanksgiving. The smell of roasted meat and rosemary filled the penthouse, masking the lingering scent of deception that had settled into the walls. Tyrell played the part of the devoted son to perfection. He poured my wine. He cut his mother's meat into small bite-sized pieces, acting like she was an invalid who couldn't lift a knife. Odessa looked pale. She ate mechanically, her eyes moving slowly from her son to me. The blood thinners were not making her high, but the constant gaslighting and the tension in the house were wearing her down. She looked exhausted. She looked like a woman who just wanted peace at any cost. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clinking of silverware on china. Then Tyrell cleared his throat. He reached under his chair and pulled out a thick blue folder. He placed it on the table right next to the centerpiece. He didn't open it immediately. He patted it gently like it was a holy book. Dad, he started, his voice smooth and practiced. Paige and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We are worried about you, truly worried. I chewed my steak slowly. I didn't swallow. I just watched him. The incident with the wallet, Tyrell continued. And the keys in the trash compactor. And the way you fell in the kitchen yesterday. It is becoming clear that managing a household of this size and the finances that go with it is becoming too much for you. We don't want you to stress. We want you to enjoy your retirement. He opened the folder. He slid a stack of legal documents across the mahogany table toward me. The top page was titled in bold black letters, Durable Power of Attorney. We had a lawyer draw this up, Tyrell said. It just gives me the authority to handle the day-to-day stuff. Paying the bills, managing the accounts, dealing with the HOA. You won't have to lift a finger. I will take care of everything. I looked at the paper. It wasn't just for paying bills. It was a full transfer of financial authority. It would give him the right to sell property, to access retirement funds, to empty bank accounts. It was a license to steal signed in ink. Tyrell held out a pen. An expensive fountain pen I had given him for his high school graduation. Sign it, Dad, he said. It is for the best. You are getting old. You are forgetful. Let me carry the load for you." I looked at Odessa. She was staring at her plate. "Odessa," I said softly, "do you think I am incapable of handling our money?" She looked up. Her eyes were wet. She looked at Tyrell, who was staring at her with a hard, intense gaze. It was a look of warning. "Sign it, Luther," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let him handle it. He is a good boy. He just wants to help." "We are tired, Luther. Let him take care of us." They had broken her. They had convinced her that we were helpless, that we were liabilities. I picked up the document. I felt the weight of the paper. It was heavy bond paper. Professional. Expensive. Tyrell leaned forward, his eyes hungry. He thought he had won. He thought the old structural engineer had finally buckled under the load. I stood up slowly. I took the document in my left hand and the glass of $200 wine in my right. I walked over to the gas fireplace that was flickering quietly in the corner of the dining room. Tyrell turned in his chair. "Dad, what are you doing? The pen is right there." I looked at the flames. They danced blue and orange. "You think I am senile?" I said, my voice low and hard. "You think I am a confused old man who puts his wallet in the fridge?" I tossed the wine into the fire. The flames roared up angry and sudden. Then I threw the document into the heart of the fire. The paper curled. The black letters turned to ash. The durable power of attorney vanished in seconds, consumed by the heat. Tyrell jumped up his chair, screeching against the floor. "Are you crazy? That cost $500 to draft." I turned to face him. I stood tall. I didn't slouch. I didn't shake. I looked him dead in the eye. "You want to manage my money, Tyrell. You want to take the load off my shoulders. Let me tell you about the load." I walked back to the table and slammed my fist down. The silver rattled. "I have $3.5 million in liquid cash sitting in a diversified portfolio, Tyrell. I have municipal bonds. I have gold bullion stored in a secure facility in Zurich. I have real estate holdings you don't even know exist. I generated an 8% return last year while sleeping." Tyrell's mouth fell open. He froze. He blinked. $3.5 million. I never told you. I continued, my voice rising, because I wanted you to build your own character. I wanted you to be a man. But I see now that was a mistake. You are not a man. You are a leech. I leaned over the table, getting right in his face. "I can afford the best financial managers in the world, son. I can hire a team of accountants from New York to manage my shoe polish budget if I wanted to. Why in God's name would I hand over the keys to my kingdom to an unemployed man who can't even pay his own rent without getting evicted?" The silence in the room was absolute. Odessa gasped. She had never known the number either. She looked at me with wide, shocked eyes. "You have $3 million, Tyrell whispered. 3.5, I corrected. "And that is just the liquid assets." I watched the greed wash over him. It was physical. His pupils dilated. His breathing hitched. He wasn't looking at his father anymore. He was looking at a winning lottery ticket. But then the greed turned to rage, a deep, dark fury born of humiliation. "You lied to me," he spat. "You sat on a mountain of gold and watched me struggle. You watched me beg for scraps. I watched you live," I said. "I watched you make choices. And now I am watching you try to steal what you didn't earn." Tyrell's face turned purple. He slammed his hand onto the table so hard the wine glasses jumped. "You arrogant old bastard. You think you are so smart. You think you can just buy your way out of this with your secret millions." He advanced on me. His fists were clenched. For a second I thought he was going to hit me right there in front of his mother. But Paige stepped in. She hadn't moved during my entire speech. She had just sat there sipping her water, watching me with those cold, dead eyes. She stood up now. She didn't look angry. She looked amused. "Sit down, Tyrell," she said calmly. Tyrell stopped. He looked at her, breathing hard. Paige walked around the table. She stopped inches from me. She smelled of that same floral perfume that masked the poison. "That is a very impressive number, Luther," she said. 3.5 million. That changes things. It makes the prize worth the game." "Get out of my house," I said. "Both of you. Pack your bags." She laughed. It was a dry sound like dead leaves skittering on pavement. "We aren't going anywhere, Dad. And neither are you. You see, it doesn't matter that you burned the papers. It doesn't matter that you have millions. In fact, that just makes it easier. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. It wasn't the power of attorney. It was something else. A medical form. "You refused to sign Tyrell's paper," she said, unfolding the document. "But Dr. Evans had no problem signing this." She held it up. It was a certificate of incapacity. It was signed by a Dr. Marcus Evans, a man I had never met. It stated clearly that Luther Banks was suffering from advanced dementia, paranoia, and was a danger to himself and others. It recommended immediate custodial guardianship be granted to his next of kin. "You bought a doctor," I whispered. "We didn't buy him," Paige corrected. "We just convinced him. He is a very sympathetic man. He understands how difficult it is to deal with a stubborn, aggressive, senile parent, especially one who has delusions of grandeur about having millions of dollars." She smiled. "So you see, Luther, you don't have $3 million. The court-appointed guardian has $3 million, and as of this morning that guardian is Tyrell." My stomach dropped. They had outflanked me. They had bypassed my consent entirely. They had weaponized the medical system against me. "We are going to have a hearing on Monday," Tyrell said, his confidence returning. "Emergency custody. Until then, you are under our care. And if you try to leave, if you try to access those accounts, we will show the judge just how erratic you have become." I looked at Odessa. She was trembling. She didn't understand the legalities, but she understood the tone. Her son had just declared war on her husband. I looked at Paige. She was winning. She knew it. I needed to get to a phone. I needed to call Gupta, the lawyer Abernathy had recommended. I needed to freeze everything before Monday morning. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I walked with the dignity of a man who still owned the building even if the tenants were trying to burn it down. "Where are you going?" Tyrell shouted. "To the bathroom," I said without looking back. "Unless you have a court order for that too." I locked the bathroom door and turned on the faucet. My hands were shaking now, not from fear but from adrenaline. They had a corrupt doctor. They had a forged diagnosis. They were going for the kill shot. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the number Abernathy had given me. "Mr. Gupta," I whispered when the line connected. "This is Luther Banks. I have a code red situation. I need you to freeze everything. I need you to nuke the accounts." "What do you mean, nuke them?" Gupta asked, his voice calm and professional. "I mean activate the dead man's switch," I said. "Lock the accounts so tight that not even I can touch them without a court order from a federal judge. If they want my money, they are going to have to dig through 10 layers of concrete to get it. And by the time they do, I will have sent them all to prison." "Consider it done," Gupta said. I hung up. I looked at myself in the mirror. The old structural engineer was gone. In his place was a demolition expert. And I was about to bring the whole structure down on their heads. The next morning I told Tyrell I was going for a walk to clear my head. He let me go, but he watched me from the window, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. I walked 3 blocks, then doubled back through an alley and hailed a cab to Abernathy's estate. I needed answers, and I needed them now. The game had changed. It was no longer just about theft. It was about survival. Abernathy was waiting for me in his server room. The air was cold and hummed with the sound of cooling fans. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He spun a heavy file folder across the metal desk. It slid to a stop right in front of me. "Open it, Luther," he said. His voice was grim. I flipped the cover. Inside were photos, obituaries, marriage certificates. "Meet Rebecca Stone," Abernathy said, pointing to a grainy photo of a woman with blonde hair. "She looks different there, doesn't she? Different hair color, no designer clothes. But look at the eyes." I looked. They were Paige's eyes. Cold, calculating, dead. That was her 10 years ago in Kentucky. Abernathy continued. She married a coal miner named Frank. He died 6 months later. Carbon monoxide leak in the garage. She collected $200,000. I turned the page. Another photo. This time she was a brunette named Sarah. 2 years later she is in Texas, Abernathy narrated. She marries a rancher. He falls off a horse and breaks his neck. He was an expert rider, Luther. She collected $500,000 that time. I turned the page again. A redhead named Lisa. Florida. Her husband drowned in a pool. He was a former competitive swimmer. My hands were shaking as I stared at the faces of these dead men. They looked like me. Hard-working, trusting, ordinary. She is a black widow, Luther Abernathy said, leaning forward. She moves from state to state. She changes her name. She changes her look. But the pattern is always the same. She finds a target with assets but no close family. She isolates them. She marries them. And then accidents happen. I looked up at him. And Tyrell. Tyrell is the perfect Mark Abernathy said. He is desperate. He is greedy. And he is weak. She is using him to get to you. She probably promised him the world. She probably told him that once you and Odessa are gone, they will live like kings. But she won't leave him alive, will she? I asked, the realization settling in my gut like a stone. Abernathy shook his head. No. Once she has the money, Tyrell becomes a liability. He knows too much. My guess is that shortly after you and your wife have your tragic accidents, Tyrell will have one too. A car crash maybe, or an overdose. She will play the grieving widow one last time and walk away with everything. I felt a surge of nausea. My son was a monster, yes. He was trying to rob me. But he was also a pawn in a game he didn't even understand. He was digging his own grave while he tried to dig mine. I stood up. I have to go back. I have to get Odessa out of there now. Be careful, Abernathy warned. You are poking a tiger, Luther. If she realizes you know who she is, she will accelerate the timeline. She won't wait for the blood thinners to work. She will use something faster. I nodded. I took the file. I hid it under my jacket. I walked out into the sunlight, but the world felt dark. I was living with a serial killer, and my son was holding the door open for her. I took a cab back to the city, but I had the driver drop me off 2 streets away. I approached the penthouse from the service entrance using a key code I had kept from the building management. I didn't want them to hear the elevator ding. I needed the element of surprise. The apartment was quiet when I entered, too quiet. The air conditioning was humming, but there were no voices, no TV, no footsteps. Odessa, I called out softly. Silence. I ran to the living room, empty. I ran to the guest wing. Empty. Then I saw it. In the kitchen, my wife was lying on the floor. She was face down near the island. Her arm was twisted at an awkward angle. A pool of liquid was spreading around her head, but it wasn't blood. It was water. A shattered pitcher lay next to her. Odessa. I screamed, running to her. I dropped to my knees. I turned her over. Her face was pale gray. Her lips were blue. She wasn't breathing. Then I saw feet. I looked up. Paige was standing by the refrigerator. She was leaning against it, arms crossed. She wasn't calling 911. She wasn't helping. She was staring at her watch, counting the seconds. "What did you do?" I roared, checking for a pulse. Paige looked at me. Her expression was bored. She fell, Luther. She just collapsed. I was just about to call for help. Liar, I spat. You were watching her die. I found a pulse. It was faint, thready, but it was there. She was alive, but barely. "Call an ambulance," I shouted. "Now." Paige didn't move. She looked at me, and for a second I saw the calculation in her eyes. She was weighing the odds. If she let her die now with me as a witness, it would be messy. If she saved her, she could try again later. She pulled out her phone slowly. So slowly. I didn't wait. I pulled out my own phone and dialed 911 on speaker while I started chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, Odessa. Breathe, baby, breathe. 911, what is your emergency? My wife collapsed, I yelled, pumping her chest. Possible overdose. Send an ambulance immediately. Overdose, Paige said sharply. She didn't take anything. She just fell. I ignored her. I focused on Odessa. I breathed into her mouth. I pumped her heart. I used every ounce of strength in my 66-year-old body to force life back into her lungs. "Where is Tyrell?" I demanded between breaths. "He went to the store," Paige said calmly. "He missed the show." She called it a show. My wife dying on the floor was entertainment to her. I kept pumping. Sweat dripped from my forehead onto Odessa's dress. "Come on, girl, don't you leave me. Not like this, not with these devils in our house." Odessa gasped. Her body arched. She sucked in a jagged breath. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and terrified. "Luther," she wheezed. "I am here, baby. I am here." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Paige pushed off the fridge. "You are lucky, Luther. She is a fighter." "Get away from her," I growled. "If you touch her again, I will kill you." Paige smiled. It was the smile of Rebecca Stone, the smile of Sarah Jenkins, the smile of a woman who had buried 3 husbands. "You won't have to kill me, Luther. You are going to be too busy trying to save yourself." The paramedics burst through the door. I stepped back, letting the professionals take over. But I never took my eyes off Paige. and she never took her eyes off me. The Cold War had turned hot, and the first casualty was lying on a stretcher gasping for air. I rode in the ambulance holding Odessa's hand. She was unconscious again, stabilized but critical. The paramedics were talking about blood pressure and heart rate, but their words sounded like they were underwater. All I could think about was the look on Paige's face, the look of a predator interrupted. When we arrived at the hospital, emergency room doors flew open. They wheeled Odessa into a trauma bay. I tried to follow, but a nurse held me back. "Sir, you have to wait here. Let the doctors work." I paced the waiting room. My clothes were rumpled. My hands were shaking. I needed to call Abernathy. I needed to call Gupta. I needed to get the police. Suddenly, the double doors swung open. A man in a white coat walked out. He scanned the room. "Family of Odessa Banks," he called out. "I am her husband," I said, stepping forward. "Is she okay?" The doctor didn't smile. He didn't offer a reassuring hand. He looked at me with cold judgment. His name tag read, Dr. Evans. Dr. Evans. The man who had signed the certificate of incapacity. The man Paige had bought. "Your wife is stable for now, Mr. Banks," Evans said, his voice loud enough for the other people in the waiting room to hear. "But her toxicology screen is alarming. She has a massive amount of sedatives in her system combined with dangerous levels of blood thinners." I stared at him. "Sedatives? I never gave her sedatives." "She overdosed," Evans said accusingly. "Or someone overdosed her." He stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. "Paige and Tyrell told me about your confusion, Luther. They told me you have been mixing up her medications. They told me you have been forgetting which pills are which." "That is a lie," I said, my voice rising. "I manage her meds perfectly. Paige has been making her tea. She has been poisoning her." Evans shook his head sadly. "Paranoia, another symptom. Look at you, Luther. You are agitated. You are sweating. You are making wild accusations against your own family." He turned to a security guard standing near the entrance. "Keep an eye on him," Evans ordered. "I have already called the police. This looks like a case of elder neglect at best. At worst, it is attempted murder." I looked past Evans. 2 uniformed police officers were walking through the automatic doors. They weren't looking at the doctor. They were looking at me, and behind them, walking in with tears streaming down their faces, were Tyrell and Paige. "Oh, Dad." Tyrell sobbed, rushing toward me. "What did you do? What did you give her?" It was a setup, a perfect trap. They had used Odessa's collapse to frame me. They were going to use the police to remove me from the board. I looked at the officers. I looked at the corrupt doctor. I looked at my son and his killer wife. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I stood my ground. I was a structural engineer, and I knew that when the weight becomes too heavy, you don't buckle. You transfer the load. "Officers," I said, raising my hands calmly, "I am glad you are here. I have a murder to report, and the suspects are standing right behind you. The police officers did not put me in handcuffs, but they did something far worse. They escorted me out of the hospital like a criminal, while my wife lay unconscious in the trauma bay. A woman from Adult Protective Services arrived within the hour. She was a short woman with tired eyes and a clipboard that she wielded like a shield. She did not want to hear about poison tea or fake doctors. She only cared about the paperwork in front of her. She handed me a thick stack of documents. It was an emergency court order. Based on the sworn testimony of Dr. Evans and the corroborating statements from my son and daughter-in-law, the state had determined that I was a threat to Odessa's safety. They cited confusion, aggression, and potential Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The words on the page blurred before my eyes. They were stripping me of my rights. They were taking my wife away. Tyrell stood behind the social worker. He was doing a fantastic job of looking like the heartbroken son. He wiped a fake tear from his eye and nodded solemnly as the officer explained that I was barred from entering the hospital or making medical decisions for Odessa until a competency hearing could be held in 3 days. But when the officers turned their backs, Tyrell looked at me. He smiled. It was a cold, victorious grin. He held up a piece of paper. It was the temporary guardianship order. He mouthed the words, "I won." He had legal control over Odessa. He had legal control over the house. He thought he had legal control over the money. He thought the game was over. He thought he had checkmated the old engineer. I looked at him one last time. I didn't scream. I didn't fight the officers. I just turned around and walked out into the cool night air. I needed to get away from the noise. I needed to find higher ground. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of a 24-hour diner near the waterfront. I needed a place to work, a place to launch the counterattack. Tyrell had the queen, but he forgot that I designed the board. I sat in the back booth of the diner nursing a black coffee. I pulled out the burner phone Abernathy had given me. I did not use my regular cell phone because I knew Tyrell would be tracking it or trying to shut it off. I dialed a number I had memorized but never called. It rang twice. A voice answered. It was deep, smooth, and sounded like it cost $500 an hour. It was Gupta. He was not a family lawyer. He was a corporate shark who specialized in hostile takeovers and asset protection for the ultra-wealthy. Abernathy had put him on retainer for me 2 days ago, Mr. Banks, Gupta said. I have been expecting your call. Abernathy sent me the video files. It has happened, I said, my voice steady. They have guardianship of my wife. They are going to try to access the accounts in the morning. I heard the sound of a keyboard clacking on the other end. What do you want to do? Gupta asked. I want you to burn the bridge, I said. Initiate Protocol 0. I want a total asset freeze. I want you to trigger the clinical death clause in the trust. Gupta paused. You know what that means, Luther. If we activate that clause, the bank locks everything. The accounts are flagged for federal audit. The real estate assets are frozen by the IRS for review. No one gets a dime. Not them. Not you. Not even for a medical emergency. It will take months to untangle. Do it, I said. I want you to flag every single account as compromised. Report identity theft. Report elder fraud. Put a lien on the penthouse. Make the money radioactive. If they try to withdraw a single dollar, I want sirens to go off. I want their cards to melt in the readers, understood, Gupta said. I am executing the order now. By the time the sun comes up, your fortune will be locked inside a digital fortress that not even a Supreme Court judge could crack in less than a year. Thank you, I said. And Luther, Gupta added, I am filing an emergency motion to overturn the guardianship. We will use the toxicology report you sent. But it will take 48 hours to get a judge. You need to stay safe until then. They are going to be very angry when they realize the well is dry. Let them be angry, I said. Anger makes people sloppy. I hung up the phone. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but I didn't care. I imagined the computer systems at the bank turning red. I imagined the digital walls slamming down around my millions. Tyrell wanted the money. He wanted to pay his debts. He wanted to live the high life. Well, he was about to find out that the Bank of Luther Banks was closed for business. Permanently. While I sat in the diner, Tyrell and Paige were celebrating their victory in the hospital cafeteria. I knew this because Abernathy was texting me updates from the bugs he had planted on their phones. They were ordering champagne, or at least the closest thing the hospital cafeteria had to it. They were laughing. They were talking about selling the penthouse and putting Odessa in a state facility the moment the doctors released her. They were already spending the money in their heads. Then the bill came. Paige pulled out one of the credit cards she had forged in my name. She handed it to the cashier with a smug smile. A moment later, the cashier handed it back. Declined. Paige frowned. She pulled out another one. Declined. She tried a third. Declined. Tyrell stepped up, laughing. He pulled out his own debit card, the one he thought was linked to the joint account he had just gained access to via the guardianship papers. He swiped it. Declined. Insufficient funds. Account frozen for suspicious activity. The smile dropped from Tyrell's face. He checked his banking app. Locked. He tried to transfer funds. Error. Then his phone rang. It wasn't the bank. It was a private number. Tyrell answered it, his hand trembling. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I knew who it was. It was the men he owed money to, the loan sharks. They had seen the news about the accident. They knew he was supposed to be coming into money. They wanted their cut. Tyrell's face turned the color of ash. I don't have it yet, he whispered into the phone. There is a delay. The bank is... Please, I just need a few more days. The voice on the other end didn't offer days. It offered threats. Violent, graphic threats involving broken legs and shallow graves. Tyrell hung up the phone. He looked at Paige. He looked like a trapped animal. The money is gone, he hissed. He locked it. The old man locked it all. Paige's face twisted. She wasn't scared. She was furious. Find him, she ordered. Find him and make him unlock it, or I will finish what I started with your mother. Tyrell didn't argue. He didn't think. The fear of the loan sharks overrode everything else. He ran out of the hospital. He jumped into his car. He drove like a madman toward the penthouse. He knew I would be there. He knew I had nowhere else to go. He was coming for me, and he was bringing a lifetime of failure and rage with him. I paid for my coffee with the cash I had withdrawn and walked out to meet my son. I hailed a cab to the penthouse. I had a date with Destiny in the garage. I stepped out of the cab at the service entrance of the penthouse building. The garage was dimly lit, a cavern of concrete and shadows. I expected silence, but instead I heard the frantic pacing of footsteps. Tyrell was waiting for me. He looked like a man who had been awake for 3 days, fueled by nothing but caffeine and terror. When he saw me, he didn't say a word. He just raised his arm. In his hand was a snub-nosed revolver. It shook violently. "Open the accounts," he screamed. His voice cracked, echoing off the concrete walls. "Open them right now, Dad, or I swear to God I will paint this floor with your brains." I stopped walking. I didn't raise my hands. I looked at the gun, then I looked at his eyes. They were wide, bloodshot, and desperate. This wasn't a calculated move. It was the reaction of a cornered animal. The loan sharks had terrified him more than the prospect of patricide. "You are going to shoot me, son," I asked, my voice calm level. "I will do it," Tyrell shouted. He took 2 steps closer. The barrel was now 3 feet from my face. "I need that money. I need it today. Call the lawyer. Tell him it was a mistake. Unlock the freeze." I looked at him with pity. "You don't understand how this works, Tyrell. Even if I called Gupta right now, the freeze takes 48 hours to lift. It is a federal protocol." "Liar," he shrieked. "You are lying. You always think you are smarter than me. Fix it." I took a step forward. He flinched, but didn't fire. "Go ahead," I said. "Pull the trigger. But before you do, you should know about the backup." "What backup?" he asked, the gun wavering. "The liquid cash is frozen," I lied, spinning a tale that would appeal to his greed. "But the cryptocurrency is not. I have $5 million in Bitcoin sitting in a cold wallet on a hard drive. It is encrypted. The password is 32 characters long, and it is stored in exactly one place. My memory." Tyrell lowered the gun an inch. "$5 million, he whispered. "If I die, that money dies with me," I said. "It becomes digital dust. No one gets it. Not you, not Paige, not the men who are coming to break your legs." He stared at me. His mind was racing, calculating the odds. He was greedy enough to believe it and desperate enough to need it. "Where is the drive?" he demanded. I tapped my temple. "It doesn't matter where the drive is if you don't have the key. You need me alive, Tyrell. You need me lucid." He let out a scream of frustration and pistol whipped the air. Fine. You want to play games. We will play games. But you aren't going anywhere until I get that password." He grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. He didn't take me to the elevator. He dragged me toward the heavy steel door of the building's maintenance basement. It was a reinforced storage area, soundproof and windowless. "Get in," he spat, shoving me into the darkness. "You stay here until you are ready to talk. And if you try anything, I will go upstairs and finish what Paige started with Mom." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I was alone in the dark, buried under my own home. I stood in the darkness for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the gloom. The only light came from the thin strip of yellow seeping in under the door. The air smelled of stale dust and hydraulic fluid. Tyrell had made a critical error. He thought he had thrown an old man into a dungeon. He forgot he had thrown a structural engineer into a utility room. I knew this building. I had studied the blueprints before I bought the penthouse. I knew where the pipes went. I knew where the wires ran. And I knew about the HVAC service shaft. I felt along the wall until my fingers brushed the cold metal of a ventilation grate. It was located near the ceiling about 7 feet up. I dragged a heavy wooden crate over to the wall. I climbed up. My knees popped and my back screamed in protest, but I ignored the pain. Pain was just information. It told you the machine was under stress, but it didn't mean the machine had to stop. I pulled the screwdriver from my pocket, the one I had used to install the cameras. I jammed it into the first screw. It was painted over rusted tight. I put my shoulder into it, grunting with effort. The screw screeched and gave way. 1 down, 3 to go. It took me 20 minutes to get the grate off. Sweat was pouring down my face, stinging my eyes. I pulled the metal cover free and set it silently on the crate. The shaft was dark and narrow, barely 2 feet wide. It was a tight squeeze for a man of my size. I pulled myself up. The metal bit into my stomach. I shimmied forward, dragging my body by my elbows. It was claustrophobic. The dust clogged my nose. The air was hot and thick. I crawled like a soldier in a trench, my mind focused on the geometry of the building. 10 feet forward, turn left at the junction. Up the riser. That should dump me out in the utility closet on the main floor right next to the guest wing. My shoulder caught on a jagged piece of sheet metal, tearing my shirt and slicing my skin. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. I kept moving. I could hear the hum of the house around me. I could feel the vibrations of the elevator. I was the ghost in the machine. I reached the vent cover for the utility closet. I pushed. It wasn't screwed in. It was held by clips. I shoved it open and tumbled out onto the floor, landing in a pile of linens. I lay there for a second, gasping for breath. I was out. I cracked the closet door. The hallway was empty. I could hear Tyrell in the living room pacing and talking on the phone, probably begging his creditors for more time. Paige was likely at the hospital playing the grieving daughter-in-law. I slipped out of the closet. I didn't run for the exit. I ran toward the lion's den. I slipped into the guest bedroom where Paige and Tyrell had been sleeping. I needed to know the enemy. I needed to see the blueprints of their destruction. The room smelled of her perfume. It was neat, orderly, too orderly. I began to search. I checked the drawers. I checked the closet. Nothing. Then I remembered the video from Abernathy's house, the way she scanned the walls. She was projecting. She hid things in the structure. I got down on my hands and knees. I checked the baseboards. Behind the nightstand, I found a loose section of trim. It was subtle, imperceptible to the untrained eye, but I saw the slight misalignment. I pried it back with my screwdriver. Behind it, nestled in the gap between the drywall and the stud, was a small black notebook. I pulled it out. My hands trembled. It wasn't a diary of feelings, it was a ledger. I opened the first page. It was dated 12 years ago. Subject Frank, weight 190, compound ethylene glycol, dosage 50 ml daily, symptoms confusion, lethargy, result cardiac arrest, payout $25,000. I turned the page. Subject Mark, weight 210, compound potassium chloride, dosage injection, result myocardial infarction, payout $5,000. I flipped through the pages. It was a catalog of death. She had documented every step, every dose, every symptom. It was meticulous. It was scientific. It was the work of a psychopath who took pride in her craft. Then I found the last entry. Subject Luther, weight 185, compound warfarin, dosage 10 milliliters daily via T, backup plan staircase fall, projected payout $3.5 million plus real estate. Note, son is weak but useful. Dispose of him post-payout via overdose. She had written down Tyrell's death sentence in the same neat handwriting she used for her grocery lists. Dispose of him. My son was nothing more than loose end to her. I pulled out my burner phone. I took photos of every single page. I made sure the text was clear. I made sure the dates were visible. This was the nail in the coffin. This was the evidence that would send her to the electric chair. I wanted to take the book. I wanted to run out of the house and straight to the police station. But Abernathy's voice echoed in my head. Do not confront them yet. Catch them in the act. If I took the book, she would know I had escaped. She would run. She would disappear and start over somewhere else with a new name and a new face. I couldn't let that happen. I had to trap her. I put the notebook back into the wall. I replaced the trim. I tapped it gently to make sure it sat flush. I wiped my fingerprints from the wall. I stood up. I had the photos. I had the knowledge. Now I needed to go back to the basement. I needed to let Tyrell think he still had the upper hand. I needed to wait for the final act. I crept back to the utility closet. I climbed back into the vent. The crawl back was harder. My body ached. My spirit was heavy with the weight of what I had read. But my resolve was iron. I lowered myself back into the basement, reattached the grate, and sat down on the floor to wait. When Tyrell came back 2 hours later with a tray of food, I was sitting exactly where he had left me. He looked at me with contempt. "Ready to talk, old man," he sneered. "Not yet," I said. "I am still thinking." He kicked the tray toward me. "Think fast. Time is running out." He slammed the door. I smiled in the darkness. He was right. Time was running out, but not for me. The next time that door opened, it would be for the grand finale, and I was going to make sure they had front row seats to their own destruction. Tyrell unlocked the basement door early the next morning. He did not look like a winner. He looked exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red, his clothes wrinkled from sleeping on the sofa. He held a suit bag in one hand and a pair of dress shoes in the other. "Get up, old man," he barked, tossing the clothes onto the dirty floor. "Today is a big day. You are going to take a shower, and you are going to shave. You need to look your best for the guests." I stood up slowly, my joints popping. "Guests?" I asked. "A little birthday party," Tyrell sneered. "Paige organized it. We invited some of your neighbors, a few of my business associates, and of course a lawyer and a notary. We are going to do this legally, Dad, in front of witnesses. You are going to sign over the assets voluntarily. You are going to smile, and you are going to tell everyone how happy you are to retire and let your son take over." He stepped closer, the gun still tucked into his waistband. "And if you act out, if you say one word about the basement or the poison or anything else, just remember that Mom is still in the hospital. One phone call from Paige and the doctors pull the plug. Do you understand?" I nodded. I understood perfectly. It was the final squeeze. They wanted the public spectacle to legitimize the theft. They wanted to parade me around like a prize pony before sending me to the glue factory. I showered in the guest bathroom under Tyrell's supervision. I dressed in my charcoal suit, the one I usually saved for church. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look broken. I looked resolved. When we walked into the living room, the transformation was startling. The penthouse had been decorated with balloons and streamers. A catering crew was setting up a buffet. It was grotesque, a celebration of my own demise funded by my own stolen money. The guests began to arrive at noon. There were neighbors I had waved to in the lobby, people who thought I was just a nice old retiree. There were men in cheap suits who looked like they broke kneecaps for a living, Tyrell's creditors, no doubt here to ensure they got paid. And sitting at the head of the dining table, looking like a vulture in a pinstripe suit, was the lawyer. Next to him sat a notary with her stamp ready. Paige was playing the hostess. She wore a white dress looking angelic. She took my arm and guided me through the room. She pinched my bicep hard enough to bruise. "Smile, Dad," she hissed through her teeth. "Everyone is watching." I smiled. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. I shook hands. I accepted congratulations for a birthday that was months away. I played the part of the confused but grateful patriarch. "All right, everyone," Paige announced, clapping her hands to silence the room. "If we could all gather around the table, Dad has a very special announcement to make." She sat me down. The lawyer slid a stack of documents in front of me. They were heavy, thick with legal jargon. Irrevocable trust transfer. General warranty deed. Full power of attorney. "Just sign by the stickers," Mr. Banks, the lawyer said, his voice bored. I looked at the papers. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. The moment they thought they won. I reached into my jacket pocket. Paige tensed, ready to stop me. But I only pulled out a silver pen. It was a heavy, expensive-looking instrument. "I prefer my own pen," I said, my voice raspy. "It is lucky." Paige relaxed. "Use whatever you want," she said sweetly. "Just sign." I uncapped the pen. It was the gadget Abernathy had given me along with the cameras. It was filled with a proprietary ink compound developed for spycraft. It flowed blue and permanent-looking, but upon exposure to air it began a chemical reaction. In exactly 1 hour, the ink would turn transparent. The paper would be blank. The contracts would be void. I put the nib to the paper. I felt the eyes of everyone in the room on my hand. Tyrell was sweating so much drops were hitting the table. Paige was holding her breath. I signed. Luther Banks. I flipped the page. I signed again. I took my time. I savored the scratching sound of the pen against the paper. With every signature, I was tightening the noose around their necks. They thought I was surrendering. I was actually setting the timer on a bomb. After the 10th signature, I capped the pen and put it back in my pocket. There, I said, "It is done." Paige snatched the papers away instantly. She handed them to the notary, who stamped them with a rhythmic thumping sound that echoed like a heartbeat. The lawyer checked them, nodding his approval. He put them in his briefcase. Paige let out a squeal of delight. She hugged Tyrell. She hugged the lawyer. She looked at me with a triumph so raw it was ugly. "Let us drink," she shouted. "Champagne for everyone." Waiters appeared with trays of crystal flutes. They poured the bubbling liquid. The room filled with cheers and applause. Tyrell downed his glass in one gulp, his hands shaking with relief. He thought his debts were paid. He thought he was free. Paige raised her glass high. To Luther she toasted, the most generous father in the world. To Luther the room echoed. I stood up. My legs felt strong. The charade was over. The trap was set. The ink was fading, but the truth was about to be written in blood. I cleared my throat. The room quieted down, expecting a thank you speech. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. "It is truly a day I will never forget. You have all witnessed a transfer of wealth today, but you have also witnessed something else." I looked at Paige. She was smiling, but her eyes were wary. She sensed a shift in the wind. "My daughter-in-law invited you all here to see me give away my life's work," I continued. "She loves surprises. She loves secrets. But she forgot that secrets have a way of coming out." "Dad, sit down," Tyrell said, stepping forward. "You are tired." I ignored him. I turned to the double doors at the entrance of the penthouse. "Before we finish our drinks, I said I have a surprise for Paige. I invited an old friend of hers, someone she hasn't seen in a very long time, someone she thought she would never see again." Paige frowned. Her glass lowered slightly. "Who are you talking about?" I gestured to the doors. They swung open slowly. The room went silent. A motorized wheelchair rolled into the room. In it sat a man who looked like he had been through a war. His face was a map of scars-burned tissue stretching the skin tight over his cheekbones. But the most shocking thing was his left leg. It ended abruptly below the knee, the pant leg pinned up. He rolled forward, the electric whir of the motor the only sound in the penthouse. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at Tyrell. He looked straight at Paige. Paige dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, spraying glass and wine over the briefcase containing the fading contracts. Her face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like she was seeing a ghost, because in her mind, she was. The man stopped his chair 3 feet from her. He looked up. His eyes were hard and cold. "Hello, Rebecca," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp damaged by smoke. Paige took a step back, stumbling over her own feet. "David," she whispered. "That is impossible. You are dead. I went to your funeral." David Thorne smiled. It was a terrifying expression on his scarred face. "Closed casket funeral, Rebecca," he said. "Very convenient for you. You collected the $300,000 from the insurance policy and left town the next day. You didn't stick around to find out that the body in the garage wasn't mine. It was the mechanic working on the car when the gas line you cut finally exploded." The room erupted in gasps. The guests backed away from Paige as if she were radioactive. Tyrell looked from the man to his wife, his brain unable to process the information. "Rebecca?" he asked. "Who is Rebecca?" I stepped forward. "She is your wife's son," I said. "Or at least that was her name when she tried to blow this man up in Arizona 10 years ago." Paige looked around the room. Her eyes were wild. She was cornered. The mask of the loving daughter-in-law was gone. The mask of the sophisticated hostess was gone. All that was left was the killer. "You are lying," she screamed, pointing at David. "This is a trick. Luther hired an actor. This man is a fraud." David reached into his shirt. He pulled out a photo. It was charred around the edges, but the image was clear. It was a wedding photo. A younger, unscarred David standing next to a blonde woman who was unmistakably Paige. "Is this a trick too?" Rebecca David asked, holding up the photo. "Or the scar on your left hip? The one you got when you fell off that horse in Texas? The husband before me? The one whose neck you broke?" Paige lunged. It was a primal, desperate move. She wasn't reaching for David. She was reaching for the steak knife on the buffet table. She grabbed at her knuckles white. "Stay back!" she shrieked, waving the knife. "Stay back, or I will kill you all!" The guests screamed and scrambled for the exits. The lawyer grabbed his briefcase and ran. Tyrell stood frozen in the middle of the chaos. He looked at the woman he married, the woman he had committed crimes for. "Paige," he stammered, "what are you doing? Put the knife down." She turned on him. The look in her eyes was pure hatred. "Shut up, you idiot," she spat. "You useless, weak idiot. You ruined everything. If you had just found the money sooner, we would be on a plane by now." She wasn't Paige anymore. She was the predator unmasked. And she was holding a blade. The room was a maelstrom of panic. Guests were tripping over each other to reach the elevators, their screams echoing off the marble floors. But amidst the chaos, one figure moved with terrifying purpose. Paige, or Rebecca, or whatever name she truly answered to. She didn't run for the door. She ran toward the sofa near the window. Sitting there wrapped in a cashmere blanket and looking confused was Odessa. Abernathy had arranged for a private ambulance to bring her home just 10 minutes ago so she could witness the signing as a formality. She was still weak from the hospital stay, her mind foggy from the drugs, but she was awake. Paige reached her in 3 strides. She grabbed a handful of Odessa's silver hair and yanked her head back. With her other hand, she pressed the serrated steak knife against the soft skin of my wife's throat. "Nobody move!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Nobody move, or I will open her up right here." I froze. David stopped his wheelchair. Even the fleeing guests paused at the door, horrified by the scene. Odessa whimpered, her eyes wide with terror. She looked at me, pleading, silent. "Paige, don't do this," I said, raising my hand slowly. "You can walk away. Just let her go. Walk away." She laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. "To where, Luther? To prison. You set me up. You brought a dead man back to life to ruin me. Well, now you are going to pay." Tyrell stepped forward. He looked like a man waking up from a long nightmare only to find himself in a worse one. His face was pale, his hands shaking violently. "Paige," he said, his voice trembling. "What are you doing? Let Mom go." This wasn't the plan. The plan, she mocked, tightening her grip on the knife. A drop of blood appeared on Odessa's neck. "The plan was for you to get the money, Tyrell. The plan was for you to not be a useless failure for once in your life. But you couldn't even do that. You let your daddy outsmart you." "We just wanted the money." Tyrell pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "You said we would get the money and leave. You said no one would get hurt." "No one would get hurt," she repeated, staring at him with contempt. "You really are an idiot, aren't you?" She shifted her gaze to me, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "Tell him, Luther. Tell him what you found in the wall." I stayed silent, my eyes fixed on the knife. "Tell him," she screamed, pressing the blade harder. "She kept a diary, Tyrell," I said, my voice flat. "A ledger of everyone she killed. Your name was in it, son." Tyrell blinked. "What?" Paige smiled. It was a cruel, predatory smile. "Did you really think I was going to spend the rest of my life with a loser like you?" she asked. "A man who cries to his mommy, a man who can't even pay his own rent." She laughed again. "I took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago, Tyrell. Double indemnity for accidental death. $2 million. Once your parents were gone and the inheritance cleared, you were going to have a little accident. Maybe a car crash, maybe a slip in the shower. It didn't matter. You were just a stepping stone." Tyrell swayed on his feet. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman he loved, the woman he had betrayed his family for, had been planning to kill him all along. He wasn't a partner. He was livestock. "You were going to kill me," he whispered. "I was going to put you out of your misery," she spat. Something broke inside Tyrell. I saw it happen. The fear in his eyes vanished, replaced by a raw, primal agony. He looked at his mother, the woman who had raised him, the woman who was currently bleeding under the knife of the woman he married. He let out a roar. It wasn't a word. It was a sound of pure anguish. He launched himself at her. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He just moved. He covered the distance between them in a split second. Paige saw him coming. She tried to turn the knife toward him, but he was too fast. He tackled her, slamming into her ribs. They fell backward onto the sofa. Odessa scrambled away, crawling on her hands and knees, gasping for breath. I ran to her. I pulled her up and shielded her with my body. Behind us, the sounds of struggle were vicious. Tyrell and Paige were rolling on the floor, knocking over tables and lamps. They were clawing at each other, screaming insults. It wasn't a fight. It was a demolition. "Let go of me, you bitch!" Tyrell yelled, punching her in the shoulder. Paige hissed like a wildcat. She still had the knife. She slashed wildly. I saw the blade flash in the light. Tyrell cried out. He grabbed his side. Blood blossomed on his white shirt, a bright red flower spreading rapidly. Paige scrambled to her feet. She was panting, her hair wild, her dress torn. She looked down at Tyrell, who was writhing on the floor, clutching his wound. She raised the knife again, ready to finish him. "Drop the weapon." The voice boomed from the doorway. It was amplified, authoritative. Paige spun around. 6 police officers in tactical gear were pouring into the room, guns drawn. Behind them stood Abernathy holding a tablet that was streaming the live feed from the hidden cameras directly to the precinct. "Drop it now or we will fire," the officer shouted. Paige looked at the police. She looked at me. She looked at the open balcony door. For a second I thought she was going to run. I thought she was going to jump. But then the fight left her. Her shoulders slumped. The knife clattered to the floor. She raised her hand slowly. Her face was blank void of emotion. The mask was gone and there was nothing underneath. Officers swarmed her. They slammed her against the wall, handcuffing her wrists. Other officers ran to Tyrell, applying pressure to his wound. Dad, Tyrell wheezed, looking at me with glazing eyes. Dad, I am sorry. I looked at him. My son, the boy who wanted to be rich. The boy who almost killed us all. Save your breath, son, I said softly. You are going to need it for the judge. The room emptied in seconds, leaving only the wreckage of a celebration that never should have happened. But Paige did not run for the exit. She knew the elevator was too slow. She knew the stairs were a trap. She turned her eyes to the only leverage she had left. Odessa. My wife was sitting on the sofa near the balcony door, wrapped in a cashmere shawl, looking confused and terrified. She had barely processed the revelation about David Thorne before the screaming started. Paige moved with the speed of a striking cobra. She lunged across the room, kicking a chair out of her way. Before I could take a step, she was behind Odessa. She grabbed a handful of my wife's silver hair and yanked her head back, exposing her throat. With her other hand, she pressed the serrated steak knife against the soft skin of Odessa's neck. "Nobody move!" Paige screamed, her voice cracking with a hysteria that was far more dangerous than her cold calculation. "Nobody take a step, or I will open her up right here." I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a sledgehammer. I calculated the distance. 20 feet. Too far. I looked at David in his wheelchair. He was unarmed and immobile. I looked at Tyrell. Tyrell stood in the center of the room, his hands trembling violently. He looked like a man waking up from a dream only to find himself in a nightmare. He stared at the woman he had married, the woman he had conspired with, and for the first time he saw the monster. "Paige," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing? Let Mom go." "This wasn't the plan. You said we would just get the signatures. You said no one would get hurt." Paige let out a laugh that sounded like glass breaking in a grinder. She pressed the knife harder. A single drop of bright red blood welled up on Odessa's skin. "The plan changed, you idiot," she spat. "The plan changed the moment your father decided to play hero. We are leaving Tyrell. We are taking the car and we are taking her. She is our ticket out of here." "We can't kidnap my mother," Tyrell pleaded, taking a hesitant step forward. "Paige, look at me. This is insane. Let her go. We can just run. We can go to the police and tell them it was a mistake." "Police," she mocked. "There is no mistake, Tyrell. There is only winning or losing. And I am not losing to a cripple and an old man. Get the keys. Get the car keys now." Tyrell didn't move. He looked at me, then at his mother, then back at Paige. The reality of his choices was crushing him. He realized that the woman holding a knife to his mother's throat didn't care about him. She didn't care about us. She only cared about survival. "I am not going anywhere with you," Tyrell said, his voice gaining a sudden, unexpected strength. "I am done, Paige. I am done." Paige's eyes narrowed. She looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated contempt. "You are done," she sneered. "You think you have a choice. You are an accomplice to attempted murder, Tyrell. You poisoned your father's tea. You gaslit your mother. You are in this just as deep as I am." "I didn't know you killed people," Tyrell shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know about the other husbands. I just wanted the money. I just wanted to pay off the debts." "And that is why you are pathetic," Paige hissed. "You wanted the prize without the work. You wanted the millions, but you didn't have the stomach to do what was necessary." She shifted her grip on the knife. Odessa whimpered, a sound of pure terror that tore through my soul. "Luther," I said, stepping forward, my hands raised. "Let her go. Take me. I am the one you want. I am the one with the money." She looked at me. Her eyes were dead. "You are useless to me now, Luther. You are too heavy to drag." "But Odessa, she is frail. She is portable." Tyrell stepped between us. He blocked her view of me. "Paige, let her go," he commanded. "Move, Tyrell," she warned. "No," he said. "I won't let you hurt her." Paige smiled. It was the cruelest expression I had ever seen on a human face. It was the look of a butcher assessing a piece of meat. "You really think you matter to me, don't you?" she asked softly. "You think you are my partner, my husband." "I am your husband," Tyrell said, though his voice wavered. "You are a mark," Paige said. "You are an investment vehicle, Tyrell, nothing more. And frankly, you were a bad investment. The return on you has been zero." "What are you talking about?" he asked. I took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago, she said casually, as if discussing the weather. $2 million. Double indemnity for accidental death. Tyrell went still. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. Life insurance, he whispered. Once your parents were dead and the inheritance cleared, you were going to have a little accident, Paige continued. Maybe a car crash on a rainy night. Maybe a slip in the shower. It didn't really matter. You were just a temporary bridge to the money, Tyrell. You were never part of the destination. I watched my son. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman he had betrayed his family for, the woman he had stolen for, had been planning to kill him the entire time. He wasn't her partner. He was her livestock. He was a pig she was fattening up for slaughter. You were going to kill me, he choked out. I was going to put you out of your misery, she replied. You are a loser, Tyrell. You always have been. You couldn't even rob your own parents right. Something snapped in Tyrell. I saw it in his shoulders. I saw it in the way his hands curled into fists. The fear evaporated, burned away by a rage so hot it consumed everything else. He looked at his mother bleeding under the knife. He looked at the woman who promised him the world and gave him a death sentence. He let out a roar. It wasn't a word. It was a primal sound of anguish and fury. He launched himself at her. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He covered the distance between them in a single bound. It was reckless. It was stupid. It was the bravest thing he had ever done. Paige saw him coming. She tried to turn the knife toward him, but he was too fast and too heavy. He tackled her, slamming his shoulder into her chest. They crashed backward into the side table, knocking over a heavy lamp. The knife skittered across the floor, but Paige scrambled after it like a spider. Odessa fell forward, free from the grip. I ran to her. I grabbed her arm and pulled her behind me, shielding her with my body. Stay back, I shouted, pushing her toward the kitchen. Behind us, the sounds of the struggle were vicious. Tyrell and Paige were rolling on the floor, clawing and punching. It wasn't a fight between a husband and wife. It was a fight to the death. Let go of me, you bitch, Tyrell yelled, punching her in the face. Paige hissed, spitting blood. She reached out her hand, searching for the knife. Her fingers brushed the handle. She grabbed it. Tyrell, I screamed, warning him. He looked down, but it was too late. Paige thrust the knife upward with all her strength. The blade sank into Tyrell's shoulder just below the collarbone. He cried out a sharp, gargled sound. He grabbed his shoulder. Blood blossomed on his white dress shirt, a bright red flower spreading rapidly across the fabric. He staggered back, falling to his knees. Paige scrambled to her feet. She was panting, her hair wild, her dress torn. She held the bloody knife in a reverse grip. She looked down at Tyrell, who was gasping for air, shock setting in. She raised the knife again, ready to finish the job. She wasn't running. She was eliminating witnesses. Police dropped the weapon. The voice boomed from the entryway, amplified and authoritative. Paige spun around. The double doors were filled with uniforms. 6 officers in tactical gear poured into the room, guns drawn and leveled at her chest. Behind them stood Abernathy holding a tablet. He had been streaming the entire feed directly to the precinct captain. Drop it now, or we will fire, the lead officer shouted. Paige looked at the police. She looked at me. She looked at the open balcony door. For a split second, I saw the calculation in her eyes. She was measuring the distance to the railing. She was considering the jump. But then the fight left her. The predator realized the cage was closed. Her shoulders slumped. Her fingers opened. The knife clattered to the marble floor with a metallic ring that signaled the end of the war. She raised her hands slowly. Her face went blank, void of all emotion. The mask was gone, and there was nothing underneath but a cold, empty void. Officers swarmed her. They slammed her against the wall, handcuffing her wrists behind her back. Other officers ran to Tyrell, applying pressure to his wound, calling for medics. I walked over to my son. He was lying on his back, staring up at the ceiling. His breath was coming in shallow gasps. He looked at me, his eyes glazing over with pain and shock. Dad, he wheezed, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. Dad, I am sorry. I didn't know. I looked at him. My son. The boy who wanted the easy way out. The boy who almost killed us all, but who in the end took a knife for his mother. Save your breath, son, I said softly, kneeling beside him. You are going to need it. The paramedics are coming. He closed his eyes. Is Mom okay? He whispered. She is alive, I said, and so are you. For now. The paramedics rushed in, pushing me aside to work on him. I stood up and watched as the police dragged Paige out of the penthouse. She didn't look back. She didn't scream. She walked with her head high, already planning her next move, already working on her defense. But I knew it wouldn't matter. I had the diary, I had the recordings, I had the witnesses. The structure she had built was demolished, and I was the one holding the sledgehammer. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. I stood behind the one-way mirror watching the disintegration of my family. They were in separate rooms, but their stories were colliding in the middle, creating a wreckage of lies. Paige sat in interview room A. She still wore her white dress, now stained with blood and dirt. She looked small, fragile, and utterly terrified. It was her best performance yet. "I did not know he was going to do that," she sobbed to the detective, her hands shaking as she reached for a tissue. "Tyrell has been unstable for months. He has a gambling problem. He owes money to terrible people. He told me that if I did not help him get his parents' money, they would kill us both. I was a hostage in my own marriage, detective. I was just trying to survive." She was brilliant. She was painting herself as the battered wife forced into crime by a desperate husband. She did not mention the poison tea. She did not mention the diary in the wall. She wove a narrative where Tyrell was the mastermind and she was the victim. In interview room B, Tyrell was a mess. He was sitting in a wheelchair, his shoulder bandaged heavily under a hospital gown. He was not acting. He was broken. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. "She is lying," he screamed when the detective told him Paige's version of events. "She is a psychopath. Check her background. Check her other husbands. She planned everything. She bought the poison. She picked the cliff. She told me when to push." He looked at the camera, his eyes pleading. "I just wanted the money," he wheezed. "I did not want to hurt anyone. She made me do it. She told me it was the only way. She said Dad was mean. She said Mom was sick. She twisted everything. It was pathetic. It was the sound of two rats in a bucket climbing over each other to escape the rising water. They were not protecting each other anymore. The pact was broken. The love, if there ever was any, had evaporated the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. I watched them and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the cold, clinical detachment of an engineer watching a controlled demolition. The structure was unsound. It had to come down. The detective walked out of Tyrell's room and came into the observation area. He looked at me. "They are both singing, Mr. Banks," he said. "But they are singing different songs. We need something definitive. Something that ties them both to the intent. Right now it is he said, she said regarding the murder plot. We can get them on assault, but I want them for attempted murder." I nodded. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out my phone and the hard drive Abernathy had given me. "I have your definitive proof, detective," I said. I walked over to the console. I plugged in the drive. On the screen, the video from the basement appeared. It was dark, but the audio was crystal clear. It was the recording I had made while hiding in the HVAC shaft. It was the recording of Paige and Tyrell discussing the dosage of the warfarin. It was the recording of them debating whether to kill me before or after the hearing. Then I pulled up the photos of the black notebook hidden behind the baseboard in the guest room. "This is where you will find it," I said, pointing to the screen. "Guest bedroom, north wall, behind the trim. It is her diary. It lists the chemicals, the dates, and the names of the men she killed before us." The detective's eyes went wide. He grabbed his radio. "Get a warrant for the penthouse guest room. Now. Do not let crime scene touch anything until you find a black notebook in the wall." Then the door to the observation room opened. Gupta walked in. He looked impeccable in his suit, a shark swimming in a tank of minnows. He carried a thick leather portfolio. "I have the financial motive," Detective Gupta announced, his voice smooth as silk. He opened the portfolio and spread documents across the table. "We ran a forensic audit on Tyrell Banks," Gupta said. "He does not just have a gambling problem. He is underwater by $500,000. He borrowed from a loan shark syndicate operating out of New Jersey. The interest rate is 200%. Gupta pointed to a specific document, a printed text log. "These are messages from the lenders. They threatened to skin him alive if he did not pay by the 1st of the month. That is why the timeline accelerated. That is why they could not wait for natural causes." I looked at the number, $500,000. My son had sold his soul and his parents' lives for $500,000. He had tried to kill the people who gave him life to pay off a debt to criminals. The detective looked at the financial records, then at the diary photos, then at the video. He let out a long, slow whistle. "This is it," he said. "This is the whole picture. Motive, means, and opportunity." He looked at me. "Mr. Banks, you did our job for us." "I didn't do it for you," I said, staring through the glass at Paige, who was now checking her makeup in the reflection of the mirror. "I did it for my wife." The detective nodded. He picked up the file. "Watch this," he said. He walked back into Paige's interrogation room. He didn't sit down. He threw the photos of the diary onto the table in front of her. "We found the book, Rebecca," he said, using her real name. Paige froze. Her hand stopped halfway to her hair. She looked at the photos. She looked at the detective. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a corpse. The act dropped. The tears stopped. Her eyes went flat and hard. "I want a lawyer," she whispered. "You are going to need a priest," the detective said. 3 hours later, the district attorney arrived personally to oversee the booking. The evidence was overwhelming. The charges were read out loud, echoing in the sterile hallway of the precinct. Paige Miller, also known as Rebecca Stone, was charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, 3 counts of wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Due to her flight risk and multiple identities, bail was denied. She was looking at life in prison without the possibility of parole and likely the death penalty in 2 other states once they reopened the cases of her previous husbands. Tyrell Banks was charged with attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, and elder abuse. His bail was set at $5 million, an amount he could never pay. As they were led away in handcuffs, Tyrell saw me standing by the exit. He stopped. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was waiting for the punishment. "Dad," he croaked. "Dad, please. I am scared. They are going to hurt me in there." I looked at him. I remembered the boy I took fishing. I remembered the boy I taught to drive. But then I remembered the man who held a gun to my face in the garage. I remembered the man who watched his mother dying on the floor and did nothing. "You should be scared, son," I said, my voice devoid of pity. "You made a deal with the devil. Now you have to pay the bill." They dragged him away. His screams echoed down the hall until a heavy metal door slammed shut, cutting them off. I turned to leave, but the doors opened again. 2 officers walked in, escorting a man in handcuffs. He was wearing a white coat, but it was wrinkled and stained with sweat. It was Dr. Evans. "Luther," he shouted when he saw me. "Luther, tell them it was a mistake. I was tricked. She tricked me." I walked up to him. I looked him in the eye. "You signed a paper saying I was crazy," I said. "You watched my wife overdosing and tried to have me arrested. You aren't a victim, doctor. You are a predator with a stethoscope." Gupta stepped up beside me. "Dr. Evans," he said, handing the man a business card. "My firm represents the medical board. We have already filed the motion to revoke your license, and the civil suit for malpractice and defamation will be filed in the morning. By the time Mr. Banks is done with you, you won't be able to afford a Band-Aid." The officers pulled Evans away. I walked out of the police station. The sun was coming up. The city was waking up. The air smelled of exhaust and rain, but to me it smelled like freedom. The long night was over. The structure had collapsed, but the foundation, the truth, was still standing. I hailed a cab. I had one more stop to make. I had to go to the hospital. I had to tell Odessa that we were orphans now. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor, which sounded like a countdown to a bomb detonation. I sat in the plastic chair next to the bed watching my wife sleep. Her face was pale, the skin translucent like parchment paper. The doctors had flushed the poison from her system and stabilized her heart, but they could not flush the betrayal from our lives. When her eyelids finally fluttered open, I felt a surge of hope that was instantly crushed by the look in her eyes. It was not relief. It was not love. It was pure, unadulterated anger. "Where is he?" She rasped, her voice weak, but her fury palpable. "Where is my son Luther?" "He is in jail, Odessa," I said softly. "He is in the hospital wing of the county jail." "You did this," she spat, trying to sit up but falling back against the pillows. "You always hated him. You always judged him. You thought he wasn't good enough because he wasn't an engineer, because he didn't build bridges like you. So you framed him. Odessa, please, I said, reaching for her hand. Don't touch me, she screamed, pulling her hand away. You are a cold man, Luther. You have a heart of stone. I saw the police. I saw you standing there while they dragged him away. He was bleeding. He was hurt. And you just watched. You let them take our baby. She was rewriting history in real time, protecting herself from the horror of the truth. To her, Tyrell was still the toddler she had nursed through fevers. He was the boy who made her Mother's Day cards. She could not reconcile that image with the man who had watched her dying on the kitchen floor. He tried to save me, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. He fought that woman. He took a knife for me, and you sent him to prison. You are the monster, Luther. You are the one who destroyed this family because you care more about your money than your own flesh and blood. Her words cut deeper than any knife. She was defending her assassin. She was blaming the only person in the world who was actually trying to keep her alive. I realized then that words would not work. Logic would not work. Love would not work. To save her, I had to break her heart completely. I had to show her the monster without the mask. I stood up. I walked to the window and took a deep breath. I hated what I had to do. It felt like violence. It felt like I was about to assault my wife. But the alternative was letting her live in a delusion that would eventually kill her. I pulled out the tablet Abernathy had given me. I tapped the screen, bringing up a video file labeled Basement Archive 04. It was the recording from the HVAC shaft. The audio was crisp. The voices were undeniable. I am not going to argue with you, Odessa, I said, walking back to the bed. I am going to show you. I held the tablet in front of her face. Take it away, she cried, turning her head. I don't want to see your lies. It is not a lie, I said, my voice hard. It is your son. Listen to him. I pressed play. On the screen, the dark image of the basement appeared, but the audio filled the room. It was Tyrell's voice. He wasn't crying. He wasn't scared. He sounded annoyed, impatient. We can't just leave the body in the apartment, Paige. It will smell. Then we pay for a cremation, Paige's voice replied. Cremation costs $3,000, Tyrell snapped. That is $3,000 less for us. Why can't we just bury her in the woods behind the cabin? Or dump her in the river? Fish got to eat too. Odessa went still. Her eyes widened, fixed on the screen. She is your mother, Tyrell Page said on the recording. You want to feed her to the fish. She is a line item, Tyrell said, cold and flat. She is an obstacle. The sooner she is in the ground, the sooner we get the payout. I don't care what happens to the meat, Page. I just want the cash. Besides, she has been dead weight for years. Dad should have dumped her a decade ago. The video ended. The silence in the hospital room was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of my lungs. Odessa stared at the black screen. Her mouth was open slightly. Her hands were trembling on the white sheets. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. The denial was gone, vaporized by the callous cruelty of her son's voice. He hadn't just plotted her death, he had stripped her of her humanity. He had called her meat. He had called her dead weight. She looked at me. Her eyes were pools of shattered glass. He said that she whispered. Her voice was the sound of a breaking branch. He said those things. He said them, I confirmed, putting the tablet away. He said them while you were cooking him dinner. He said them while you were defending him. Odessa let out a sound I will never forget. It was a wail, a long, low, keening wail of pure grief. She curled into a ball on the bed, clutching her stomach as if she had been gutted. She cried for the baby she held. She cried for the boy she raised. She cried for the man who wanted to dump her in a river to save $3,000. I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my arms around her. I held her while she shook. I held her while she screamed into my chest, soaking my shirt with her tears. He is gone, she sobbed. My boy is gone. He was never there. Odessa, I said, stroking her hair. The boy we loved was a mask. He was a stranger. She looked up at me. Her face was ravaged by pain, but her eyes were clear. The anger at me was gone, replaced by a shared tragedy. She gripped my hand so hard her fingernails dug into my skin. We are alone, she whispered. No, I said. We have each other. She shook her head slowly. No, Luther. You don't understand. We aren't just alone. We are orphans. We have no children. We have no legacy. It ends with us. I kissed her forehead. It ends with us. I agreed, but we are still standing. And as long as we are standing, we will not let them win. She nodded. She wiped her face. She took a deep breath. It was a shaky breath, but it was the breath of a survivor. "Don't let him out," she said, her voice turning to steel. "Don't you dare let him out, Luther." "I won't. I promised." I locked the door and I threw away the key. She closed her eyes. "Good. Now hold me. Just hold me until the hurting stops." I held her. I watched the sun set over the city. We were two old trees in a storm, battered and stripped of our leaves, but our roots were intertwined and deep. We had lost our fruit, but we had kept our ground. And in the morning we would face the world together, not as parents, but as survivors. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. The trial of the century, they called it. The Black Widow and the Prodigal Son. Cameras lined the back of the room like vultures waiting for a carcass. I sat in the front row holding Odessa's hand. Her grip was tight, her knuckles white. She was not there to save them. She was there to bury them. Paige had fired her public defender on the first day. She decided to represent herself. It was a move born of narcissism and desperation. She stood before the jury wearing a modest gray suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked nothing like the woman who had held a knife to my wife's throat. She looked like a librarian. She looked innocent. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice soft and trembling, "you have heard the prosecution call me a monster. You have heard them call me a predator. But look at me. Do I look like a killer to you? Or do I look like a woman who was trapped?" She walked toward the jury box, making eye contact with every juror. "I married into the Banks family because I loved Tyrell." She lied, tears welling in her eyes on command. But I was an outsider. I was always the white girl, the interloper. Luther Banks hated me from the moment I walked through the door. He controlled everything. The money, the house, even his son. He made me feel small. He made me feel unsafe. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He is the manipulator," she shouted. He drove his son to madness with his impossible standards. Tyrell was terrified of him. Tyrell told me that if we did not get the money, Luther would cut him off, that he would let us starve. I was just trying to protect my husband. I was just trying to survive in a hostile environment. It was a disgusting performance. She was weaponizing race. She was weaponizing victimhood. She was trying to paint herself as a martyr who had been forced into crime by a tyrannical father-in-law. Tyrell sat at the defense table, his head in his hands, listening to his wife throw him under the bus to save herself. He didn't object. He didn't speak. He was already a ghost. When it was my turn to take the stand, I did not look at Paige. I did not look at Tyrell. I looked at the jury. I was sworn in. I adjusted my tie. I sat with the posture of a man who had spent 40 years ensuring that things did not fall down. "Mr. Banks," the prosecutor asked, "how do you respond to the defendant's claim that you created a hostile environment that forced them to act?" I leaned into the microphone. My voice was deep, steady, and filled with the resonance of absolute truth. "I am a structural engineer," I began. "I have spent my life studying why things fail, why bridges collapse, why buildings crumble. There are two types of failure. There is external stress, like an earthquake or a hurricane, and then there is internal rot, a flaw in the material itself." I looked at Paige. "This woman is a hurricane," I said. "She leaves destruction wherever she goes. She is an external force of chaos, but she did not force anyone to do anything. She simply applied pressure to the weak points." Then I turned my eyes to Tyrell. He looked up. His eyes were wet with tears. He looked at me with a desperate hope, as if he expected me to save him, as if he expected me to tell the jury that he was a good boy who made a mistake. "And my son," I continued, my voice hardening into concrete. "My son is the internal rot. He is the structural flaw." I tried to reinforce him. I gave him love. I gave him education. I gave him opportunities. But the metal was bad. The core was hollow. Tyrell flinched as if I had slapped him. "He is not a victim." I told the jury, pointing at the man who shared my DNA. "He is a man who watched his mother dying on the kitchen floor and did nothing because he wanted a payout. He is a man who held a gun to his father's head because he owed money to criminals." I paused, letting the weight of the words settle over the room. "I do not have a son anymore," I said. "That man sitting there is a stranger to me. He is a malignant tumor that I nurtured by mistake, and like any tumor, he must be cut out before he kills the host." Tyrell put his head down on the table and sobbed. It wasn't the cry of a repentant man, it was the cry of a child who realizes the parent is finally done protecting him. I stepped down from the stand. I walked back to Odessa. She didn't look at Tyrell. She looked at me and squeezed my hand. We were united in our grief and our resolve. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman did not look at the defendants. That is always the sign. We, the jury, find the defendant Paige Miller guilty on all counts, the foreman read. Attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, aggravated assault. Paige did not cry. She went rigid. Her eyes turned black with hate. She looked at me and mouthed the words, "I will get you." I stared back at her unafraid. She was a caged animal now. We find the defendant Tyrell Banks guilty on all counts, the foreman continued. Tyrell let out a low moan. The judge wasted no time with sentencing. Due to the heinous nature of the crimes and the prior history of the defendant, Paige Miller discovered during the investigation, I am sentencing you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, the states of Texas, Arizona, and Kentucky have filed extradition requests for murder trials pending the conclusion of your federal sentence. You will never walk free again. Paige slammed her fists on the table, screaming obscenities until the bailiffs gagged her and dragged her toward the holding cell. The judge turned to Tyrell. Mr. Banks, your father called you a structural flaw. I am inclined to agree. You betrayed the people who gave you life for money. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison. Tyrell stood up. His legs gave out, and the marshals had to hold him up. Dad, he screamed, his voice cracking. Dad, please. Don't let them take me. I am sorry. Mom, help me. Odessa did not move. She stared straight ahead, her face a mask of stone. Dad? I am scared, he wailed as they dragged him toward the door. Dad, I love you. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at the door where my son had just disappeared. I love the memory of you, I whispered to the empty air. But I hate the man you became. I turned to Odessa. Ready to go, I asked. She stood up, leaning on her cane. I am ready, Luther. Let us go home. We walked out of the courtroom. The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Banks, how do you feel? Mr. Banks, do you forgive him? I ignored them all. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun. The air was fresh. The city noise was a dull roar. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that wasn't tainted by betrayal. It was over. The weight was gone. The structure had held. It was damaged. It was scarred, but it was still standing. And so were we. The for sale sign went up on the penthouse exactly 1 week after the sentencing. I did not want to spend another night inside those walls. Every room held a ghost. The kitchen where my wife almost died. The dining room where my son tried to steal my life. The guest room where a serial killer slept. It was structurally sound concrete and steel, but the soul of the place was rotten. I called Rick, the real estate agent, the same man who had witnessed the confrontation at his office. He sold it in 3 days for a cash offer well above asking price. I did not haggle. I just signed the papers. We did not pack boxes this time. I walked through the rooms with Odessa. We looked at the expensive Italian leather sofas, the mahogany tables, the crystal chandeliers. They were just things. Heavy, expensive anchors. Sell it all, I told the estate liquidators. Everything. Every fork, every towel, every piece of furniture. I want it gone. Odessa stood in the middle of the empty living room. She looked small, but she stood straight. Her cough was gone thanks to the doctors flushing the poison from her system. Do you want to keep anything, Luther? She asked. I looked at my drafting table, the one I had used for 30 years. No, I said. That table designed bridges that connected people. This house only built walls. Let it go. We walked out of the service elevator for the last time. We carried 2 suitcases. That was it. 45 years of marriage and a lifetime of accumulation distilled down to 2 bags of clothes and a box of photographs. We left the keys on the counter. We left the bad memories in the drywall. We walked out into the street lighter than we had been in decades. The weight of the deception was gone. We were homeless by choice, and it felt like victory. The money from the sale plus the liquidated assets from the furniture auction went into a new account. But this one did not bear my name. I called Gupta one last time. I want to set up a trust, I said. The Banks and Abernathy Scholarship Fund. Gupta was silent for a moment. Abernathy, he asked. He helped save my wife, I said. He deserves his name on the door. The fund is for orphans Gupta, specifically for children aging out of the foster system. I want to pay for their college. I want to pay for trade school. I want to give them the start in life that my son threw away. I realized that blood does not make a family. Character makes a family. I wanted to invest in character. I wanted to build a legacy that wasn't based on DNA but on potential. With the rest of the money I made, one selfish purchase. I went to a dealership on the outskirts of town and bought a 45-foot Prevost motorhome. It was a beast of a machine. Stainless steel chassis, bulletproof tires, a diesel engine that could pull a freight train. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress on wheels. It had a king-size bed, a full kitchen, and satellite internet. Odessa looked at it, her eyes wide. "It is Big Luther," she said, running her hand along the chrome. "It is freedom, Odessa," I said. "It has no address. It has no mailbox for subpoenas. It has no doorbell for ungrateful children. It goes where we want, when we want." She climbed into the passenger seat. "It looks like a spaceship," she laughed. It was the first time I had heard her laugh in a year. It was a rusty sound, but it was real. I sat in the driver's seat. The dashboard wrapped around me like a cockpit. I felt the engine rumble to life beneath us. It was a vibration of power, of control. I wasn't just a retired engineer anymore. I was the captain of my own destiny. Before I released the parking brake, my phone buzzed. It was the burner phone, the one I was about to throw into the river. I looked at the screen. It was a text from Abernathy. "Luther, I was doing a final sweep of your old garage before the new owners took possession. I found a loose brick behind the tool bench. Your son was busy. I found a metal box. Inside was $50,000 in cash." I stared at the screen. 50,000. That was the money Tyrell had stolen from us over the years. The small withdrawals, the forged checks. He hadn't spent it all on gambling. He had rat-holed some of it away, a nest egg for his getaway. He had hidden it in my own garage right under my nose while he plotted to kill me. The irony was perfect. He died in prison a pauper while the money he stole sat collecting dust in a tin box. Abernathy's text continued. "I deposited it into the scholarship fund. I figured Tyrell would want to help some kids who actually deserve a future." I laughed. It was a deep belly laugh that shook my chest. It was the final punchline to a terrible joke. "What is it?" Luther Odessa asked, looking at me with concern. "Just a final structural adjustment," I said. "The accounts are balanced, Odessa. The ledger is closed." I rolled down the window. I took the burner phone and tossed it into the nearest trash can. It clattered against the metal, a final note in the symphony of our liberation. I put the RV in gear. The air brakes hissed. The massive vehicle began to roll forward. "Where are we going?" Odessa asked, looking out at the highway stretching before us. I looked at her. I looked at the road. "West," I said. "Or maybe north. It doesn't matter. No phone, no address, just us." She reached across the console and took my hand. "Just us," she repeated. I emerged onto the interstate. The city skyline, the penthouse, the courthouse, the jail. It all faded into the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was nothing but a speck of dust on the horizon. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. The foundation was solid. The road was open. And for the first time in a long time, the bridge we were crossing was one that would never collapse. I spent 40 years calculating load limits, but the heaviest weight I ever carried was the expectation that blood implies loyalty. It does not. I learned that a family isn't built on DNA. It is built on respect, and when that foundation rots, you don't patch it, you demolish it. True wealth isn't the millions sitting in my bank account. It is the peace of knowing I am sleeping next to the only person who ever truly loved me for me. Never apologize for cutting off a branch that is poisoning the tree, even if that branch is your own son. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to cut a toxic family member out of your life to save your own peace?